Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Thomas Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry, from tech companies that enable wineries to run at optimum efficiency, to today's guest, Ron Scharman. His contributions to direct-to-consumer wine sales segment are too numerous to mention. Today's episode is sponsored by Barrels Ahead. At Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with your ideal customers. In short, we help wineries and craft beverage producers unlock their story to unleash their revenue. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. And I am super excited today to talk with Ron Scharman. Ron's the founder and CEO of FlyWithWine, a unique wine travel luggage company that markets the VinoVisit product line. Ron also runs Astra Digital, a digital marketing agency serving wine industry clients in North America and Europe. Welcome to the show, Ron. And again, I am sorry for mispronouncing VinoVisit.
That's fine. Thanks. Glad to be here today.
Oh man, thank you so much for being on the show. So tell me, we're recording in January, and it's a brand new year. What's in store for FlyWithWine?
Well, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, Omicron, wine travel is still restricted, but I think the breakout of people wanting to travel, certainly domestically, which happened late spring, which brought a lot of travelers to California from other places in the U.S., was just great for our business. Mm-hmm. We're still missing all the international travelers from Asia and Canada and Europe and South America that used to come to wine country. But the U.S. consumers are certainly traveling and buying a lot of our products.
Oh, that's fantastic. Taking a step back, I guess I jumped to it a little more. To give us a little background of FlyWithWine. Where did that idea come from?
Well, FlyWithWine was started. Well, our company FlyWithWine started 6 years ago, but before that, 2 years before, an inventor in New Mexico, a guy named Barry Wax, had an idea and invented this product, which was a wine suitcase, which was unique because there was nothing like that in existence. And he was looking for ways to market it. And I came to know him through my prior company I was running, which was VinoVisit.com, which was like an open table for winery reservations. Mm-hmm. And we had a huge database of people who made reservations at wineries. And we built an ECommerce site on the VinoVisit reservation platform. And we would send out emails and market wine country products like barrel furniture, like cork accessories, stemware, winery maps, and the number one selling item was this wine suitcase. So I got to know the founder, and in 2016, when VinoVisit was sold, I decided to leave and start up, two companies. One was Astra Digital, the other was FlyWithWine, which is our DBA, and I partnered with the inventor to basically help market that product to the wine industry, and ultimately took total control of the products. We're basically the exclusive marketer and seller in North America right now, and Europe to some extent. But it all started with just realizing that people who are in wine country really love the product, and that was before we got it into tasting rooms and got into other sales channels as well. But so it was also a time when I was traveling overseas a lot, and I was in Europe going to wineries, Germany, France, Italy, Spain. And the idea of trying to get wine back to the U.S., typically through the wineries would send you to mailbox, etc., and you'd go there with your wine, and they would ship it, and God knows how long it would take and where it would go and whether it would even get there and how it would be handled. And I went through that a few times. And so it was clearly, I was looking for a product that could address that. And that's how I discovered the founder of the VinoVisit.
That's a great story. And it's a tremendous problem. I mean, it's a great problem that you're solving. I mean, I know I've traveled, and finding a shipper in the wine country is often one of the harder things to do. All the wineries have shippers.
Well, the other thing is if you're spending $200 a bottle or more on Cabernet or whatever it is, or Pinot Noir up in Oregon, you're spending good money, or anywhere where you're spending high value. You're at who knows what happens when it goes to UPS or FedEx. It ships on a loading dock in the sun in the summer and cooks, or it freezes in the winter. Instead of putting in the suitcase and taking it with you on the plane.
No, makes so much sense.
That's kind of the whole point. And it's really, this was our greatest year ever this past year, and we're over 300 tasting rooms. We're on Amazon. We're in Neiman Marcus. We're in Total Wine and Dillard's, and we've really built a really great footprint in addition to our own Fly with Wine website.
Oh wow! What sort of feedback are you hearing from the wineries that are selling it?
Well, wineries, we had to convince them. Initially, it was quite an obstacle, and originally I had to do it on consignment 6 years ago because they just didn't believe that their customers would want a wine suitcase. And I kept saying, you don't understand. There's a problem. We're solving a problem where they say, well, it's too expensive merchandise to sell. And I would say, well, this is a sales tool. Mm-hmm. It's not a piece of merchandise. You're solving a problem your customers have. Mm-hmm. Trust me, once you have it, you will sell it. It will sell more wine. And once they got that message, and we've done training over the years with them, that they really upsell customer may only want to buy 6 or 7 or 8 bottles, and you'll upsell them, to a case because you have a wine suitcase, right? Mm-hmm. It's just became really a great sales tool, and it increased the other part of it is it obviously goes into the sales calculations for bonuses and everything in the tasting room. So once they start selling it, they hate to stop, and it's really built quite a following in California, Napa, Sonoma, Oregon, Washington, our primary markets, doing really well.
Oh, that's amazing, and it's all it's worldwide right now, and it's sold in wineries across the world as well as in large department stores. Well, where do you see the biggest growth segment? Is it in wineries, or are you expanding out more to Amazon and to the traditional retailers?
Well, we're just working now, for example, signed a deal with the PGA. We're going to be working with the PGA on a whole wine and golf lifestyle kind of thing. Oh, nice. Because obviously people are sick and tired of getting golf hats and shirts and paraphernalia at these tournaments, and wouldn't a little, we have 3 sizes of the suitcase. Piccolo's 5 bottle, the Petite's 8, and the Grande's 12. But you can put your clothes and wine in the suitcase. That's what makes it unique, right? You can mix and match what you want. So getting a little small suitcase, a wine suitcase, as in these tournaments or in the pro shops, is very exciting for the PGA. The other thing is add specialty, giving it as a gift, whether for sports teams or Las Vegas hotels or whatever it may be. Then there's the whole travel tourism side where people are doing group trips to wine country, and what we do is we put custom plates on the suitcase, either the logo of the winery or the name of the sponsor. And so when tourists come, it could be like Yokohama Tire that comes to Napa, and they bring 60 of their important sales folks to Napa. And when they arrive at the hotel, in their room is a wine suitcase with their name on it. Mm. So those are kind of the more outside the box kind of things that we're working on, instead of just selling it in wholesale channels.
That's a great value add. That's a great swag gift. I would really love to get that over the golf shirt, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it has to have increased the direct consumer sales in the winery, because now that people don't have if they're going to buy the suitcase, they've got no excuse to fill it.
Right, and we do also drop ship for all of them. So if they have somebody that wants that comes into the tasting room and they want us to drop ship it for them, we can ship the suitcase anywhere in the country. Also, we'll have some of the wineries will, come holiday time, we'll buy 50 suitcases and they'll fill it with wine and send it out to their top customers, or they'll do a wine club shipment for their high-end wine club, and they'll ship it out to their top customers inside the suitcase, which we put in a gift box. We have a white gift box that we do for them. So there's lots of different ways they can use it for loyalty and retention. at the wineries. And again, it's a tool. It's a sales tool. It's not just a piece of a souvenir.
Not just luggage, not just a product. And
yes,
I love wineries. Everyone's looking. How do you distinguish yourself? How do you differentiate yourself in this marketplace? And that's kind of shifting it. That's your background. You're kind of one of the legends in direct to consumer and some of the creative strategies you put together. How did you get how did you get your background in direct to consumer, and what led you into that?
Well, it's one of those things where, like, people will ask me. I teach at Sonoma State also, and younger people will ask me, like, how did you get to do what you do now? And I said, well, it's sort of a little bit of planned randomness. You plan enough randomness in your life, and you meet the people that change your life. So I had been, after grad school, I went into banking and was doing investment banking and got into doing workouts and turnarounds in working for I left to start with the two bankers, ex-bankers, to start a merchant bank. And we invested in a bunch of companies, and we started doing workouts and turnarounds in retail companies. And that led me to get involved with private equity funds like Goldman Sachs, like Fidelity High Yield, Morgan Stanley, and others that had investments in retailers where the principals were, the founders were principals, and I would be brought in to help run those companies, to help, in a sense, protect the founders from the investors, so that, and grow those businesses. And one of them was a cosmetics and fragrance chain that was in 8 states. And then in 2001, I was recruited to become the CEO of Morel & Company in New York, which is very sophisticated in terms of the channels they were in. It's one of the largest retailers in the Northeast, and they had their shop at Rockefeller Center. They had a wine bar. They had another restaurant they opened, wine auction house, wine storage business, and about 2 million catalogs a year that we sent out through the New York Times blue bag. They stuffed it in with the newspaper as well as the mailing list. And we had 2 websites. So, and it was a big private investor, Stevens Investments out of Arkansas, who had invested in originally Walmart, and they owned 50% of the company. And of course, they thought 50% meant that they had control. Well, when the other 50% could say no to anything, it became a real stalemate. So they brought me in as sort of the voice of reason to deal with the Morel families. And during those 4 years was really when, this is prior to social media, but still e-commerce was right after 2001 was the meltdown of .coms. But still people were, e-commerce was just in its nascent stages in the wine industry anyway. But we did really well with, I was able to integrate catalog, e-commerce, and an outbound telesales team of 10 people that was really great. Plus, introduced wine education. We had Morel Wine Institute for education, Morel Wine Events. I started for wine events that focused on the folks that were in the investment banks, accounting firms, law firms, high net worth individuals that would all get together and convene around one common theme, which was great wine. And Morel had 75% of the customers of Morel. I should say at that time, 75% of the wine that they sold was over $30 a bottle. This is 2001 to 2005.
Yeah.
So you may not the significance of that, but at that time, that was better than anybody. We really had that high end. We had a vault. It was literally, the store had been a vault of a bank at one time, and the back was a vault where we kept all the crown jewels. And since they had the auction division, I would go to the auction when they ran auctions, and I would have a paddle, and I'd be buying wines at auction to put in the vault. And so we became, as an example, the only one probably in America, but certainly in the New York area, if someone was doing a high-end dinner on the Upper East Side of New York and they needed, 8 cases of vintage wines of Harlan or Opus or whatever it might be, we would have them in stock because of the way I use the auction house to feed it. A little ahead of my time in that regard, but in a sense, I got a good really understanding for wine consumers, really good understanding of imports versus domestic wines at price points. That was sort of my great education in wine commerce, not just e-commerce, but wine commerce and marketing.
Sure.
And so in 2005, when I had one son in college, the other one was going to college, my wife and I decided to move out to Napa, which we had gotten to know from the early 90s when I was running a company in LA, and had come to get to know Napa. And so when I arrived in 2005, was a whole new scene. I mean, a whole new thing with the Granholm decision having been announced that basically said that states could not discriminate against in-state and out-of-state wine shippers or wineries, but they could complicate. So they passed all these specific laws to complicate interstate shipping, even though it was technically so-called legal. You needed permits and everything else. And so I came out to Napa, and I was recruited to run New Vine Logistics, which is now Wine Direct, but that was like the pioneer in winery fulfillment and in compliance, because we had a sophisticated technology and algorithms to manage the licensing process. It was before this; there was no ship compliant at that time. So it was really one of the pioneers in that whole area, and we were able to ship to something like 32 states at that time using this complicated 3-tier shipping mechanism. And we got a lot of wineries on board doing that. And after 2 years, I really felt that my heart was really in marketing and sales, and not in managing logistics. But I really believed in the future was e-commerce, and so I invested in a friend of mine's business, which was eWinery Solutions. That was 2007, which is now VinSuite. And we built that up into one of the largest e-commerce players in the wine industry, and got to, we had about 800 winery clients at the time. And I focused more on the marketing, and education side. And I got to see again at that time, e-commerce, what all people wanted was a shopping cart. Because in 2005, people were still faxing. Most of the business coming in via faxes and telephone. Wineries did not have shopping carts. If anything, they might have a web page for information. But it really started around 2007, which is the same time that Facebook launched and the smartphone launched. So that's 2007. Before that, there was no iPhone, there was no Facebook. So those things tended to really drive awareness, and people decided really that they needed to have shopping carts. And so we really mushroomed that company up. And then, of course, along came other competitors in the industry. And,
right around 2004, I had Vintelec, which was helping independent wine stores with their e-commerce systems. I can tell you I can commiserate what an uphill battle that was, convincing them.
Well, some didn't even, didn't believe in it. Even later on, just as an anecdote, in 2014 to 16, I left the winery in 2014 really to focus on marketing. But I was running VinoVisit and Chatterbox Wine Marketing, which did telesales. One of our clients was Chapelet, and they still had 5% of their sales of their high-end Pritchard Hill. 5% of their customers still preferred to fax in their orders because they didn't trust putting their information in the shopping cart. And it's 2014. I mean, I know it's now 8 years, but it's still, it was hard to believe that faxes are still, still prevalent, still important. So, but in any case, the e-commerce, I really saw that whole evolution of e-commerce. 2007 was Facebook and other social platforms, smartphone. It was only 2010 that the tablet, the iPad came out, which is pretty amazing. 2012 was the advent of HTML5, which was an incredible advance because it replaced the need to have Adobe Flash, which, that scrolling problem, which you'd sit there waiting for the images to load. And HTML5, which is a content programming language, allowed much faster speed on mobile devices. And then you go through the advent of the smartwatch and Alexa and all the other smart, voice activated technology. And now we have augmented reality, and now you've got,
you got the metaverse.
You got a metaverse, you got everything else. So, I mean, we're, gone through all of that, seen all of that, and how what implications there are for marketing. I've been fortunate enough to see and be able to look at trends and try to be ahead of the curve. Also, having come from outside the wine industry, I've been following and watching retail marketing and technology all along the way, and trying to implement ideas from outside the wine industry into the wine industry wherever possible.
That's important. And I've been in and out of the wine industry for the last 30 years. And what I always tell is some of the stuff that I learned in hospitality or in the legal side of the work, they're on the cutting edge of what marketing's been doing. And to be able to bring that back into the industry adds so much value. You talk about a lot of the history of technology over the last 20 years. What's that common theme or that mindset with not just the retail customer, but with wineries and retailers selling wine? I mean, I've got an idea for the evolution, but maybe I'd like to hear what you're thinking.
Well, in terms of what?
Well, back in the day. So we actually share a very common history. I too kind of stumbled into the wine industry, graduated with a degree in philosophy and Attic Greek, and then got an MBA in finance, but needed to find a job in San Francisco back in '93 and got a job as a stock boy in a wine store. And it was right then where I helped them build the first, website. And then we actually were running some wine auctions in the mid '90s and through the wine store. But I always saw that our customers, and maybe it was because of San Francisco, but we always had a very tech focused customer base where they would love every new trick and every new kind of way to buy wine. But what I saw was the resistance being on the wine side and being on the actual stores selling the wine, not embracing it and wanting kind of that old school hand sell, hand conversation, touch the bottle, then make the sell. And then I see that kind of evolving over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think wineries, the real issue is that traditionally the owners of wineries who came from outside the wine industry and were really successful in other businesses forgot everything they learned once they came into the wine industry. So, and wineries will spend $1 million on landscaping, but they won't spend 10 cents on marketing. So that mindset permeates into how they approach technology, because when there's a cost associated with technology, just like with marketing, they don't look at it in terms of, well, what is this going to do for me? I mean, how much more productive? What's the benefit of this financially? They only look at it as a cost. So they don't really, they don't like, they don't view it in the same way, other than in the accounting departments. The accountants tend to roll the rules. So the accountants need software, they get the software. Maybe the winemakers will get it too, but marketing and no. The other aspect is software is a tool. Technology are basically a set of tools. And if you don't have the people that are capable or willing to use the tools, it's a waste of time. I mean, I'll give one great example. I don't know what the year was. It was maybe 2009 or something. We had, in my eWinery days, we had all the great big clients, big wineries were our clients. We did all the websites for Constellation, for Gallo, for Diageo, for Treasury, Kendall Jackson. I mean, we had them all. And I remember Constellation had this decision. They wanted to implement Oracle CRM, not just in the headquarters. They wanted all the way into the tasting rooms. And so they spent a couple $1 million with Oracle, and they spent a ton of money with us to do a hell of a lot of custom programming to implement the system for all their wineries. And they were never able to roll it out because there was such resistance to the complexity of running reports, because they were the tasting rooms and the marketing people at headquarters also were used to, easier systems to use than trying to use Oracle, which was very complex. And you needed to have programmers in-house to do the kind of things you needed to do. So they ended up just basically scrapping it. And so even at a lower level, that's the fear factor of, well, if we implement this technology, we got to have people have to learn it. I'm more comfortable with the system I know than the system I don't know. And so that often became a reason why. Great example is, AMS, which was around forever. It's like the dinosaur of the wine industry because it was the one unified system that had accounting, warehouse inventory management, winemaking, and everything, and e-commerce. But the shopping cart was really underperforming. It was really not up to par. I might say more. I use stronger words if I had a glass of wine with me, but it was it was always behind the times. And the trouble is that the people who made the decisions were the accountants. They wanted AMS. The people in the marketing departments wanted eWinery. They wanted VinSuite, which is now Wine Direct. They want Commerce 7. They want something else. But it took, and AMS didn't integrate with anything in those days. So it was really resistance. We had situations where we were able to convince the winery two wineries actually, who had AMS to have us build websites for them. They ran it for 6 to 8 months, and then they were forced by pressure to turn them off and go back to AMS again because of the lack of integration problems. Even though the marketing solution, you could sell a lot more wine, but it didn't matter if the accountants couldn't figure things out. So I think technology in the wine industry is very often a problem of people that are not willing to do workarounds that are sometimes required to get a better outcome for the user, meaning the end user, the consumer, or for the marketers, or because they're just resistant to change, period. They like things the way they are, and fax machines work fine. Why should we have a shopping cart?
There seems to be an undue respect to the thought of yesterday being better, that kind of gentrified farmer, the very lo-fi technology, whereas any sort of e-commerce is an infringement. Any sort of automation or any sort of predictive selling is an affront to that idealized dream of the way wine used to be, is kind of what I see a lot.
Absolutely. And, I think what's changed, the big change came when there was a transition of generations, where the younger generation coming in said, hey, and social media, same thing with social media. It took a while for people to get with social media in terms of the importance for marketing as a channel. It's not just noise. It's because this gets me to Astra. Our digital agency was born with a concept that social media got a bad rap in the wine industry, not just in the wine industry, outside too, but specifically in the wine industry, because they never had any metrics around it. So nobody could prove that it worked. So we created an agency that was really what we call metric-driven digital marketing, making sure that we could create certain metrics or KPIs that we could measure. You spent $1,000 on advertising, digital advertising. What did you get for it? Could you tie that transaction to Google Analytics or someplace else? So you could say, okay, I know that I got for every 1,000, I got 5,000 back. And that kind of broke the myth a little bit, because we started to prove to clients, and over time got a pretty good reputation around that kind of social media marketing, which is some of it is just brand building enhancement, but what has to pay for itself has to be something that you can measure and prove actually drives results.
To a smaller winery that may be doing it themselves and not able to hire an agency to set the KPIs, what's a starter KPI that a winery should start tracking on social media?
Well, first of all, there's a little bit more around that. You can't track. You can't pick a KPI unless you've got the ability to track. So the question is, forget what is the KPI. You got to have tracking. So all your social media posts, as well as your emails and everything, should have tracking codes. We call them urchin, UTMs, urchin tracking modules are called. But it's a snippet of code. So everything has to have codes. Then you have to have Google Analytics set up on your website so you can track where your sources are coming from. Where's traffic coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, depending on the e-commerce platform, you have something that called a Google Advanced e-commerce setup, so that you can actually measure a social media post or a dollar spent on boosting to a sale. So, I mean, I think it's more about being able to track sources before I do anything else. So you got to have the tracking set up to see, okay, for all the posts I'm doing, what is happening? Well, you know, how much traffic am I getting to my website? How much engagement am I getting? Likes, shares, whatever it might be. And what conversions am I getting from that? Just doing those things will allow you to make intelligent decisions, because, you know, I have a saying, which is, unless a metric can help you make a decision, then it's useless.
Yep.
I mean, so just tracking. I know some people, you know, you know, I've worked for people like this over the years. They'd have these flash reports, all this stuff, and then, or board members, companies I've run, they'd have all the demand for all this information. They never look at it, right?
Yep.
So a metric in its own self is useless unless it can help you make a decision. So the same thing with social metrics. You can track everything, but the question is, what am I going to do with it?
That is fantastic advice, and I kind of like the way you describe that. I often describe that as, if you're not tracking anything, you're doing branding. Once you start tracking, once you start building upon it, then you're doing marketing. But too many social media sites are just branding,
and it could be
enhancement,
and it could be bad branding. You know, there's no even way to measure whether it's good or bad, right?
Oh yeah, no. If you're just posting it out there and hoping they're going to go.
Yeah.
So and now with the wineries, you talk. I love the quote about the million. You should be spending at least as much on your website as you do on your landscaping, and that makes to a lot of wineries, especially in Napa and Sonoma, where you're on a well-traveled wine route. Right. It is the landscaping that may draw the person in as they drive by. But in today's expanding wine world, there's a lot of wineries that are in Lompok's garage district, where you've got Tin City, that really isn't luring the people in based on the landscaping. And the only thing you really have is your digital footprint, which is your new landscaping. Do you see this evolving with these new digital natives? And how are you at Astra? I'm not going to steal it, but we're confronted with the same ways. How do you convince them that there's a new breed coming up, and the digital landscape may be the new landscape?
Well, I mean, it started for us back in the fires in Santa Rosa. I mean, I think it's 3 years ago. And wineries in Napa were closed for a month and a half because of the smoke that came from Santa Rosa. And a president of a pretty famous winery, who I've known for years, my software days, called me and said, "Ron, my customers are dying, getting older. We have more fires than ever. Can you help me? I need to get new customers. How am I going to get them?" And I can't tell you how many conversations, permutations on that I've had over the last few years from owners of wineries, realizing that the days of just, great location is all you need, right? And a pretty tasting room, that there's no annuity in that. There's too much competition. When Napa had 200 wineries versus 1,000 or 1,100 now, maybe half of which open to the public. And Sonoma, the same thing, explosion. It was easy, but now the competition is like so fierce. So I think the battle is over in the regard. The only question is making the case in a way that they can justify the economics. I had a referral yesterday from goes back to my VinoVisit days. A winery in Sonoma makes beautiful wines, smaller. Over time, they've grown. That their banker, Silicon Valley Bank, recommended us to them because they really need to improve their top line numbers. And that's a convincing thing. They never would have. We've talked to them for years, but they weren't going to do anything. But their banker recommended they do something, right? Everybody's out there recommending, digital marketing strategy, whether you do it in-house or you outsource it. You have to do something. You can't stay passive. The other thing is, one has to think about this. If the wine market overall in the United States is only growing by 1% now a year,
Mm-hmm.
And some brands are growing really strongly. And imports are growing. They're making great wine all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whose hide is this coming out of? Who's losing it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's coming out of someone's hide. So you can't just assume the past is not a great predictor to the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so and people are worried about this. I mean, I was very heavily into doing webinars during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was really about politely getting you off your ass and doing something and thinking in terms of virtual, virtual tastings or virtual
Mm-hmm.
wine clubs, and using it as another channel, communicating with people that can't visit so often,
Mm-hmm.
and not being so dependent on this opiate, which is the walk-in wine club member,
Uh-huh.
And so, and a lot of people got the message, and a lot of people developed that channel and are have mixed it in now. Obviously, there was a fatigue factor, but I think wineries today, most wineries realize they need a digital strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like saying I need to lose weight, or I need to cut down on sugar, or whatever it might be. Doesn't mean that they're going to actually spend money to do it just yet. But there's an
Mm-hmm.
awareness. There's an awareness.
There definitely is. I like that mentioning top line revenue. And that's where I think a lot of people mistake marketing. They confuse it again with branding. And really, I like the new term that's coming out. I'm still not used to using it, but it's tying marketing into revenue and having that full revenue operations and full revenue strategy. Because a lot of marketing, the whole purpose of it is to boost revenue. So it should be tied with sales, and it should be tied with that kind of operating segment, which is where you get the e-commerce in. And I think presenting marketing on that level becomes a little more intriguing to wineries, in that they can actually see that it filtering down to the bottom line and not just more of a vanity type of a process.
Well, one thing I dwell on, and I stress a lot with wineries, is the idea of new customer acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the value of a new customer? I have this whole thing. I wrote a blog, what's the value of an email?
Mm-hmm.
Because wineries are so, and I explained to wineries, I have a whole mathematical calculation, how you can figure out what the value of an email is.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in Napa, I mean, it's anywhere from $15 to $35 on calculations I've done for an email. So why are you not compensating your tasting room staff heavily for the value of an email? And yet you may give them an incentive for a wine club, but email, maybe you don't think it's so important. But the reality is that the value of a customer, which comes from having that email, is so important, because that's the annuity.
Mm-hmm.
To give you a situation, analogous situation, which is just the opposite, is FlyWithWine. Most people don't need more than one wine suitcase. So I have to calculate, okay, what's the most I can spend to acquire that new customer?
Mm-hmm.
Right? If the suitcase sells for $350 and my profit margin is let's just say it was 50%, in theory,
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't spend more than $175 or even less than that, because that customer 90% of the time is not going to buy another suitcase. Now, they may refer me something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a winery, the lifetime value of a winery customer could be, the wine club members, probably $2,000. If you add in the other sales, maybe it's $3,000 or $4,000. So in theory, they should be able to spend several $1,000s in advertising just to get a new customer.
Yeah.
But believe me, they won't do that. They don't, not initially. Initially,
Mm-hmm.
you make the argument. I'll tell them, I'll ask them, okay, you tell me what the value of a new customer is for you. And they'll give you the number. Say, okay, we're going to use your number and we're going to roll out an advertising budget based on that. Right? Because at least we have a metric, the value of a customer,
Sure.
we can tie to an advertising spend.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the same thing as tied to the top line. You got to somehow tie it to the revenue number. What's the value in a revenue number? And then it's easy. The math, it's all mathematics at that point.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great advice for any winery on figuring out what's your customer cost of acquisition and what's your lifetime value of that customer.
Right.
How do you increase that? How do they keep them club members longer, bring in new? And that kind of ties into content. And I know that's very important for Astra and what you're doing.
Sure.
What advice would you give wineries creating content on their site? Aside from just got to have good imagery. Everyone's got that.
Well, I think what wineries don't understand in a real time sense is that is the importance of relevance for content. There's a seasonality factor. You have to make sure you can't just, if you look at wineries that will show photography from winter when it's summer, or summer when it's winter, or spring when it's fall, and vice versa. So having relevant content that's timely, that's ongoing, and it's really, again, it's same thing with websites. It's about the consumer, not about the winery, right? So that's one of the key things that have to go into. Just can I pause 1 second, because
sure.
I'm back in business.
Start again. Yeah, talking about content and having it relevant and resonating with the seasons and resonating with the customer. You hit the nail on the head there, and that it has to resonate with the customer. In your opinion, how many wineries actually understand who their buyer persona is?
Oh, it's let's just say that most don't. And what's interesting is whenever we start with a client, we do something called a digital audit. We analyze the winery against 3 competitors, and we go through a whole analysis of their social media footprint, of their email, how they appear on third-party sites, user experience on the website, SEO, and a bunch of other things. But one of the things is, and we do the brand persona. Who do you think your customer is? We ask them. Then we analyze their social media stats to see who they are. And we look at Google Analytics, who's coming to the website. And very often it's totally different than who they think their customer is. Because they may think of it anecdotally from the tasting room scenario, like who's walking in,
or who they want their customer to be.
Right. Well, aspirationally, then you can say, here's who we'd like it to be. And we do that. That's maybe our recommendation. But we can see clearly from the social and the Google Analytics, and even from MailChimp stats as well, we can see pretty much who their customer is. And so, and very often they're off the mark. And their social media, the look and feel of the website, very often is not consistent with who their customer really is. And so that's a real aha moment for them, So I think assuming is never a good idea. You really should look at the information that's available to figure that one out.
Absolutely. Because then I guess the choice is either these are the type of people that seem to be resonating with your website, but these are the type of people that you would really like to have. Well, you either have to alter it to where you're aspiring to reach, or you need to keep on going and know that your marketing needs to be directed towards your existing customer base, so it can even resonate a little bit more.
Absolutely.
You see a lot of the kind of the newer, I don't want to say younger winery, that's the wrong term, but there's a lot of very mission focused wineries coming out, and it's very easy for them to attract a certain audience because they've kind of laid it all out on the line on what type of they're going to be like, and then they attract it. But a lot of the wineries start with a vision or they start with a dream, a founder's dream. And I think a lot of wineries assume that the type of people that are going to come to that winery are the ones that embrace the founder's dream, which found isn't often the case.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Man, this has been a good conversation. I do want to ask though, right now, who is going into 2022? What advice do you give wineries for their direct to consumer?
Well, I think we've leapfrogged 5 to 10 years in e-commerce. I would say that this day was not supposed to come, but it's here. The numbers I saw from clients, what they did the last year, 2021 and 2020 and 21 were incredible. Blew my mind in some cases. And then investing in strong integrated, what we call omni-channel marketing that integrates sort of seamless social media, email, AdWords, other together in a unified way can really bring great results, because e-commerce is here to stay. And if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it. Take again, that 1%, you've got competition all over the place. And you got competition now, whether it's with Drizzly or, Total Wine is growing like crazy. There's a lot more. You got wine.com. You got a lot of other places for people to buy wine.
Coming online. Wine.
Yeah. So you have to really think about how can I get new customers, and then of course all the changes in privacy with Apple iOS and with Google that are going to make it a little more challenging to do get new customer acquisition, doing lookalikes and things like that. So I think one really has to invest in this area because it's harder to find more people to work in the tasting rooms.
Oh, yeah.
All right. There's more competition. People are going to, for wine clubs that than ever before. And the old way of doing things is just not going to help. I mean,
for sure. Where would you like to see e-commerce systems go in the next year? I mean, we're talking, it can be platform agnostic, but the Commerce 7s, the Wine Directs, the VinSuites. So Ron, as far as we know what wineries need to embrace it, but for the POS companies, for the e-commerce companies, for the Commerce 7s, the Wine Directs, the VinSuites of the world, where would you like to see their development progression go and their roadmap in the next year or two?
Well, I think there's a lot of tools that are plugins for other platforms outside the wine industry that it boggles my mind that you don't have with a lot of the platforms. I mean, things like cart abandonment software, which should be a no-brainer, which only one or two platforms have. Referral platforms, wineries, want to get more referrals. I mean, so we've had to jerry-rig using some referral software programs that should be built in. Retention and loyalty is such a big part of the wine business. So I think those are two examples of things that are really important that they should add.
I would love to see that. You just hit the nail. Two things that we struggle with all the time.
Yeah.
They should be part of the system. Yeah. So as we're wrapping down, I got to ask, who do you admire most right now in the wine industry?
Who do you admire most right now? I think the one that really, I mean, it blows my mind are the folks at Tank Garage up in Calistoga.
I was just gonna.
They are the most innovative wine marketers, e-commerce players in person. The events they do, the whole thing. Shout out to Ed Fuchik, who's like one of the real smart marketers in the wine industry, always has been. Known him for 15 years, going back to my software days. But he's really created what I think is a great example of how in a traditional marketplace like Napa, you can do something totally outside the box, totally going after a different audience, creating such a great social media presence and doing it with a lot of fun.
Yep. I was actually thinking of them when I said how many wineries understand their persona, and there's a few upstarts that really get it. It was Tank Garage that was in my mind.
Yeah. I love them.
That's great. So when you're not marketing, when you're not being an entrepreneur, what keeps you busy?
Well, I mean, absent COVID, I mean, we were wine travelers. I mean, been all over the world, and we always go to Europe a couple times a year. We travel all up and down wine country. So, I missed that the most. In late fall, I was able to get up to Washington for a week, Washington wine country, to the whole state, Oregon. So I'm hopeful. I'm supposed to go to Europe in March. We'll see. But to me, that's it. When I'm not doing that, I'm hiking or reading, but it's all about it. You got to have something to look forward to.
Oh, yeah.
Right. No, so it's those trips that are the things that keep you, working 24/7. As long as I know there's the light at the end of the tunnel is that trip.
Yeah. I just postponed our trip to Piedmont. We were supposed to go at the end of February. Now it's going to be 2023. But we've got a trip up to Oregon planned, so that's going to be fun.
Yeah, great.
Well, Ron, where can people find out more about you in Astra and FlyWithWine?
Well, FlyWithWine is, they go to flywithwine.com if they are interested in wine travel suitcase. We also are a huge seller of Gabriel glass, which is incredible stemware from Austria. Sell a lot of that. We're also coming out with the Wine Hive, which is a a wine storage unit that's in the shape of beehive cells, things like that.
Oh.
That's coming up. So that's Fly with Wine, and then there's Astra's www.astradms.com.
For all your D2C winery needs.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Pleasure being here.
I'll talk to you later on.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.